Wait. This isn't the Angry Birds movie.
Dance off, bro!
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I'm gonna make him an offer, Captain.
The Birds is one of those strange movies where it has a good reputation generally, yet all of my friends who have seen it don't seem to like it that much. So naturally, I was curious. And upon first viewing, I really didn't like it that much either. However, after watching it a second time, I find that I do appreciate the film more, although overall I still don't care for a whole lot. So let's get into the feathery mess that is Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. After watching The Birds the first time, I read about there being a potential subliminal message in the film, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. The film seems to suggest that the true birds of prey to man is women.
Women.
In my second viewing, I watched closely for this, and while subtext is always subjective and theoretical, I'd say that there's probably some truth to this being Hitchcock's intended message. In the film, there is really only one male character, Mitch, and basically every female character is in some way vying for his undivided attention. Annie moves to Bodega Bay to be closer to Mitch. Melanie delivers Katzyy a pair of lovebirds on behalf of Mitch so she can get closer to Mitch, and then moves in with Annie so she can stay closer to Mitch. Lydia is unpleasant to both Annie and Melanie to try and keep them away so that Mitch won't leave her and he will stay close to her. Katzyy wants the lovebirds from Mitch for her birthday because this sort of gift-giving is a symbol of their closeness as siblings. Katzyy is also friendly with Annie and Melanie because she knows that Mitch likes them and she wants to be involved in whatever relationship might develop. What we end up having is a parallel between the female quote-unquote birds swarming around and taking over the life of a man, which is a sort of death in the spiritual sense as his life is no longer his but belongs to the woman that gets him, and the actual birds literally swarming around and literally killing mankind.
Here man, or rather woman, thought enough of the birds to have an entire one as a decoration. It's quite dead, of course.
Of course, this reading of the film is mostly conjecture, based on Alfred Hitchcock's own known misogynistic attitude towards women. Indeed, famously during the production of this film, he allegedly made numerous inappropriate advances on Tippi Hedren. Yet, Hitchcock never openly expresses any hidden intent for the film, keeping the story mostly focused on the terror of the birds themselves. All else is only hinted at for the audience to speculate. On the other hand, lending credibility to the hidden woman equals bird symbolism is that this isn't the first time that Hitchcock has made such references. In Psycho, just 3 years prior, Hitchcock was already associating women with birds. Norman Bates taxidermies birds for a hobby, and with women, well, you can tell how that metaphor works out. He also directly tells a woman, "You eat like a bird."
You eat like a bird.
You know, of course.
Not to mention, the sisters in that film are named Crane. So perhaps we can safely assume that Hitchcock really did mean to associate women in a negative way to the attacking birds in this film. On the one hand, this makes the film less surface level than it may seem, and the film is therefore more interesting, but on the other hand, what's below the surface is not too pleasant.
I don't believe in dealing with controversial matters.
Another thing that I noticed about The Birds is how it kind of foreshadows the typical zombie movie formula. For some unexplained reason, and ordinarily harmless things, in this case birds, or in the case of a zombie movie, corpses, suddenly starts attacking people and thus plunges society into chaos. The protagonists must hunker down in whatever shelter they can find, boarding up the windows if they have to, and wait out the night as the creatures try to force their way in. Then, if they survive until morning, try to leave and meet up with whatever humanity might be left out there resisting the apocalypse. Swap out the avians for the undead, and The Birds has the same premise as Night of the Living Dead, which came out 5 years later. I would also like to praise some of the atmospheric shots in this film, something that I acknowledged even in my first viewing despite not liking much else. Whenever any birds come into frame, their mere presence creates tension. Ordinarily, some crows perched on a playground would be an ordinary sight, but given what we know about what is likely about to happen, this image becomes menacing. And as the film goes on, we see more and more birds in larger and larger flocks, thus increasing the stakes and thus the level of dread. Well done by the master of suspense. As far as things I still don't like about the movie, for one, there's the bad child acting. Veronica Cartwright would later go on to have a decent career, but in this early role of hers, she's just really bad. And her obviously fake crying just deflates the seriousness out of every serious scene in which she's in. But children aren't the only problem I have with the movie. Adult actors, too, often make cartoonishly dumb decisions that evaporates any credibility that the film tries to have. There's a scene where Tippi Hedren's character is being attacked, so she tries to get back inside, but can't open the door. She just fumbles with the handle, and she fumbles, and she fumbles, and she fumbles, and it got to the point where, in a scene that was supposed to be scary, I was just laughing at how ridiculous it was. I don't care if you're being attacked by a few birds, that's no excuse for being that uncoordinated. Something like this is what I would expect from a low-budget B-movie horror flick, not from an Alfred Hitchcock film. If you're really one of the best directors of all time, why do you make your characters so dumb that whenever the birds start attacking, they all run outside and get attacked? Like, no shit, what did you think what would happen? Again, this seems like B-movie decision-making, and not at all in line with the prestige that the master of suspense has built up for himself. Really, this movie at times is more silly than suspenseful. In the end, while I do recognize some of the things that make this movie great in the eyes of some, there are still just too many unserious aspects to this film that rightfully belong in a B-movie for me to actually take this movie as seriously as it wants me to take it. Taking into account what I was able to appreciate in this film with what I don't like, overall I'd give this an average score. I think it's important enough from a historical perspective to recommend it to you for those historical reasons, but I'm not going to be raving too much about this movie though. Heh, see what I did there? Anyway, that's about all I have to say about that. Good night.